So, you're dreaming about getting out on the Appalachian Trail, but you don't have the 6 months to take off to do the whole thing. That's okay. Do I have any suggestions of where you could go if you just have a few days or a couple of weeks? Yes, I do. Hi guys, I'm Audrey, known as Glow Stick on Trail if you don't know me. In 2018, I quit my job in Washington, D.C. to thru-hike the Appalachian Trail from Georgia to Maine, and it was awesome. So, I don't mean to play favorites, but I am gonna play favorites and tell you guys about 3 of my favorite sections on trail that I think would be great for people who only have a few days or a couple weeks to take off to do part of the trail. That's not to say that none of the other sections of trail are worth visiting, because there are so many amazing sections of trail that you could go and visit. But these 3 I just think would be, well, first of all, they're incredible. Second of all, I think they would be great for people who are, say, not in thru-hiker shape. Meaning that you maybe don't wanna crank out like 20-mile days every day and whatnot. Without further ado, these 3 sections of trail that I would recommend that you check out are the Great Smoky Mountains, Virginia's Triple Crown, and the 100-mile wilderness in Maine. And those are not in any specific order because the 100-mile wilderness in Maine is hands down my favorite part of the entire trail. And if I could ever go back, I was only allowed to visit one section of trail ever again in my life, I would go to the 100-mile wilderness. But let me talk you through these 3 sections and why I would recommend that you do these if you can't do the entire trail.
Rumors get around the trail, and they get around the trail fast. One of the rumors that I heard after I had started my AT thru-hike was that once I got to the Smokies, they were gonna kick my butt. It was gonna be freezing, the weather was gonna be terrible, the peaks were gonna be so hard, it was gonna be awful. Well, guess what? That was completely wrong. The Smokies were such a freaking delight. I got super lucky with the weather and had blue skies almost every single day that I was inside the Smokies. They were so enchanting. The forests are so diverse. There's wildlife. There's plenty of wildflowers. When I went to town to do a little resupply and came back, I got stuck in a bear jam because all of these cars stopped to watch this black bear that was on the side of the road. It was so cute. My only regret is that I wasn't there later in the spring because I would have loved to see things even more alive. Like the trees were still pretty bare. There wasn't too much wildlife out. We only got lucky with seeing a few wildflowers. And I was obsessed with seeing salamanders because in Bill Bryson's book, A Walk in the Woods, he talks so much about how the diversity of salamanders in the Smokies is so great. And I was disappointed that I didn't get to see them myself. If you want to do the entire section of the AT through the Smokies, it's about 71 miles. And something you should know is that you have to reserve shelters and campsites in advance. And I believe you have to get a wilderness permit. I even had to have a permit to backpack through the Smokies, even though I was doing the entire AT. So just look into that ahead of time before you go. But I can't reiterate enough how lovely this section of trail was, how gorgeous the views, how enchanting it all felt, and how the forest just felt so alive, even though it was only just the beginning of spring when I went through there. And I can only imagine how gorgeous this section of trail would be in full-on spring when everything is alive and popping, and in fall. I'd love to go back sometime when the leaves are popping.
So that's on the Great Smoky Mountains and why they're so great. So let's move on to the Virginia Triple Crown, which includes the Dragon's Tooth, McAfee Knob, and Tinker Cliffs.
Virginia's Triple Crown is in the Roanoke Valley of Virginia. There are a couple of different ways that you can do this hike depending on whether you want to do a loop or just one way. Say you and a friend each have a car and you can just do one way. But I found a route on All Trails that you can do it in 35 miles to see all 3. This hike, I would say, is a really good option if you're looking for some really easily photographable places and you don't want to work too hard for it. And that's not to say there is a rumor on the trail that Virginia is flat, and I am here to tell you that Virginia is absolutely not flat, but Virginia is definitely more gentle rolling hills as opposed to some of the more strenuous, like directly up a mountainside. And go up this mountain and then go around it and then go up it again, that you do get a lot of that along the AT in different places. So compared to all that, Virginia is definitely more gentle, but don't believe people when they say that Virginia is flat, because it is absolutely not. Anyway, if you go the traditional way, which is to go northbound, you will first get to the Dragon's Tooth, which involves a bit of climbing, and then McAfee Knob, which is the most photographed place on the entire AT, and then you will get to Tinker Cliffs, which just offer really beautiful views. And if I could offer any piece of advice if you're going to do this backpacking trip, it's to go in the spring, because Virginia has the most incredibly beautiful wildflowers I have ever seen in my life. Mountain laurels and rhododendrons and mountain azaleas and flame azaleas just make the forest so vibrant. And in spring, I mean, these Virginia forests are just so freaking alive. Wildlife and flowers, and it's so green. And I mean, it does tend to get a bit of rain in the spring, but it just makes everything feel even more alive and more enchanted. Virginia is just sort of a fairyland, especially in spring.
So that's on visiting the Virginia Triple Crown. And now let's move on to the best part of the entire trail, the 100-mile wilderness in Maine.
The 100-mile wilderness runs from about Monson, Maine, to the border of Baxter State Park, where Mount Katahdin is. As the name suggests, it is a 100-mile section of trail, and it is probably the most remote section of the Appalachian Trail. That's not saying too much, because in reality, the Appalachian Trail just is really not that remote. The east coast of the U.S. is so built up that you will very often come across roads, and if you needed to get off trail for something, you definitely usually could within a few miles. But the 100-mile wilderness is definitely more rustic than the whole rest of the trail, and it's harder to get out to via car. So personally, I carried enough food with me to hike through the entire section, the entire 100-mile section, although I did have friends that paid for a food drop while they were inside. It is insanely beautiful, and there are so many swimming opportunities, so many little lakes and ponds and streams. If you're lucky, you might see a moose, although I never did. The first 50 miles of it I found quite challenging. I was going northbound, but the second 50 miles I found to be quite easy hiking and just incredibly beautiful. So much reward for so little work, at least compared to the first half. The leaves were just starting to change in the fall when I was there, and I would love to go back sometime when the leaves are in their peak fall foliage. I can't imagine how incredibly beautiful that is. And if I could offer a piece of advice, it is, if you have a little extra time, go off and do the Gulf Hagass Trail. I'm not sure that I'm saying that right, but it's basically the Grand Canyon of Maine, and it is beautiful waterfall after waterfall after waterfall after waterfall. Basically, this section of trail is just incredibly beautiful. There are tons of swimming opportunities. There's a lot of wildlife. I saw beavers on one of my last days in there, which was super, super cool. And this is also a fairyland, basically.
So I think that those are all really good options for section hikes if you want to do a section of the AT but can't do the entire trail. So to recap, that's the Great Smoky Mountains, the Virginia Triple Crown, and the 100-mile wilderness, where a piece of my heart will always be. If you really want to push yourself, you could do a section of trail in southern Maine, maybe the Bigelows. You could do the White Mountains in New Hampshire, but let me just warn you that the White Mountains, while they're incredibly beautiful and wild and diverse and unique, they're also just so hard. The White Mountains are the hardest part of the entire AT, in my opinion. Aside, I would say the hardest climb of the trail is Katahdin, but the hardest section of the trail is the White Mountains in New Hampshire. So if you really want to push yourself or you're in great shape, I say go for it. If you want to have more of a chill, beautiful, naturey time, maybe do a different section of trail. But anyway, hope that you enjoyed this video. If you have a favorite section of the AT that you want to mention and tell people to go see, mention it in the comments. Otherwise, thanks for coming along with me today. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more hiking and AT content. See you all later.